They stared at her tattoos. They smirked, whispered, and one Navy SEAL even asked, "Why all the ink?" Lady loud enough to humiliate her in front of the entire room. But what he didn't know, each line of that ink was earned in blood, sand, and sacrifice. This wasn't decoration. It was a real battlefield story. And when she answered, she didn't just shut down a room full of elite operators. She redefined what military respect truly means. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Excuse me, ma'am, civilian classrooms are down the hall. The voice sliced through the hum of casual chatter like a command barked across a battlefield. Arya Blake paused with one foot inside the classroom. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of a desk near the front row, but her eyes stayed forward. She didn't blink. She didn't smirk. She just stood still for a beat, letting the tension settle. She wore a fitted olive green tee and dark jeans, nothing flashy, but far from standard military issue. Her long blonde hair framed a face that was calm, unreadable, but it wasn't the shirt or the hair that caught attention. It was her arms. Ink wrapped from wrist to bicep, precise lines, jagged ridges, black stars, and Pashto script, the kind of tattoos that told stories, if anyone in the room bothered to ask. The soldier's young buzz cut in standard camo were mid-chatter until she stepped in. Now they were staring, some with furrowed brows, others wide-eyed. One, sitting front and center, leaned forward and said it loud enough for the others to hear, "Why all the ink, lady?" Arya turned to face him, calm, steady. She smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated before. The room went quiet, like someone had sucked the oxygen right out of it. Arya looked directly at the young soldier who had asked the question. His tone hadn't been cruel, just confident, cocky, even like he expected a punchline, something witty or dismissive, something easy. What he got was silence, heavy silence. She took a slow step forward, her boots thudding softly on the linoleum. The projector above them hummed, unused. No one moved. "That's a fair question," Arya said, her voice low but clear. "But before I answer it, let me ask you something." She walked up the center aisle now, calm and deliberate. The soldiers shifted in their chairs, eyes tracking her like they were watching a threat they hadn't quite identified yet. "You ever get blood under your fingernails that no amount of scrubbing could get out?" she asked. Her eyes locked on the soldier in the front row, the one who asked. He blinked, confused. "Ever watched a teammate bleed out on your lap while you called in a bird that was never going to make it in time?" No answer, not a sound. She kept walking. Ever stood barefoot in the middle of a family's shattered living room, helping a little girl cough up dust and glass while your interpreter tells her mother that her father's not coming home? Arya stopped in the dead center of the room. "That's why all the ink." No one laughed, no one smirked. The energy had shifted entirely. She rolled up the sleeves of her shirt. The room leaned in. Her left arm revealed a jagged black line, a topographic map of the Kamdar Valley in Afghanistan. She traced it slowly with her finger. "This line here," she said, "is where my team got pinned down for 6 hours. We lost 2 Master Sergeant Nolan and Corporal James. Nolan bled out while I held pressure on his thigh. That star, that's where he died." Mouths slightly open, eyes wide. The young men in uniform looked less like soldiers now, and more like students. Arya had their full attention. She turned her arm, showing a thin line of Pashto script interwoven with delicate floral patterns. From a distance, it looked like a pretty design. Up close, it read like a memorial. "These names," she continued, "they're Afghan women, locals. They fed us intel, warned us about IEDs, helped us find missing kids. 3 of them were executed for it. But without them, half of your future teammates wouldn't have made it home." She looked around slowly. "I don't wear these tattoos to look tough. I wear them because I couldn't bear to look at my skin anymore. The blood wouldn't wash off, so I covered it with something I could choose, something I could carry with me without screaming every time I closed my eyes. The soldier who had asked the question dropped his gaze. Arya didn't let up. I wore the same gear as you, 40 pounds of kit, full battle rattle. I sweated in the same desert, took the same fire, and when I came home, I wasn't met with handshakes. I was met with assumptions, just like today. She paused. Let them feel it. See, when you looked at me, you saw a woman in a tight shirt and tattoos. You didn't see the calluses on my palms from fast roping. You didn't see the scar under my collarbone from shrapnel. You saw what you expected to see. She stepped back toward the front of the room. That's dangerous. Out there, if you only see what you expect, you miss what's actually there. You miss the threat or the asset. Silence. Then a soft voice from the back, "Ma'am, who were you with?" Arya looked toward the young man who spoke. "Cultural support team attached to JSOC." She answered, "I embedded with Tier 1 units, mostly Rangers and SEALs. I was the one knocking on doors when no one else could. I was the one translating emotions, not just words. I was the one they sent in first because I could see what others ignored." The soldier in the front row looked up again, shame in his eyes. "I didn't mean any disrespect," he murmured. "I know," Arya said, not unkindly, "but now you understand why it matters." And then she walked to the podium, plugged in the flash drive, and brought the projector to life. Behind her, 40 soldiers sat in rapt silence, not because of rank, not because of command, but because for the first time, they realized they were being taught by someone who'd lived through hell and came back with the map inked into her skin. Arya was halfway through her slide deck when the door at the back of the room slammed open. The sound echoed off the cinder block walls like a gunshot, jerking the heads of every soldier in the room. A man stepped inside, barrel-chested, square-jawed, radiating authority. His uniform was sharp, his boots polished to a mirror shine. Senior Chief Donovan. He walked with that stiff-backed, wide-shouldered stride of someone who didn't ask for space, he simply took it. His eyes locked onto Arya like she was a threat, and in his world, anything unfamiliar was a threat. "Who gave you clearance to be in here?" he barked before even reaching the first row. The room, once full of energy, froze. The young soldiers stiffened in their seats, unsure if they were about to witness a reprimand or a battle of ranks. Arya didn't flinch. She turned to face him slowly, the projection from the screen lighting up her ink-covered arm in pale blues and grays. "I did," she replied, voice calm, 3 weeks ago, through official channels. He ignored her words, stepped closer. "You're interrupting a classified training environment. This is SEAL prep, not a TED Talk. Grab your things and walk out now." No one breathed. The soldier who had asked about her tattoos earlier looked as if he might say something, but thought better of it. Arya held her ground. "Check your orders. Chief, my name is on the docket. I'm the SME subject matter expert for this training block." Donovan scoffed. "Smee, you're kidding." He gestured to her tattoos, to her clothes, to her very presence. "You walk in here looking like a biker chick, and I'm supposed to believe you're here to educate these men." Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I've spent more time outside the wire than half this room combined," she said. "My ink doesn't change that." Outside the wire, he laughed, but it was sharp and cutting. "Let me guess. You handed out candy to kids and wrote reports about feelings. That kind of outside the wire." Someone at the back winced. Arya took one step forward. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't intimidated. But she was absolutely done. "I dragged wounded teammates to an exfil point under RPG fire," she said. "I negotiated with tribal elders while gunfire echoed in the hills. I called in medevac birds while applying pressure to arterial bleeds. And yes, I also wrote the reports. Because someone has to make sure we remember who bled and why." Donovan's face darkened. He opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, the door opened a second time. Captain Jonathan Reeves walked in, Commanding officer, full weight of the chain of command. He scanned the room once, took in the projector, the frozen soldiers, and the standoff between Arya and the chief. "What's going on?" he asked, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Chief Donovan turned. "Sir, I'm addressing an unauthorized presence." Captain Reeves raised an eyebrow. "You mean the guest speaker who's listed on your own schedule?" He walked past Donovan and joined Arya at the front. "Ms. Arya Blake has been cleared at the highest level for this training. You were at the briefing, or did you not bother reading it?" Donovan's mouth opened, then shut. Reeves didn't wait. "Take a seat, Chief." But Donovan started. "That wasn't a request." The senior chief stiffened, then turned sharply and dropped into an empty chair at the back, his glare burning a hole through the floor. Reeves turned to Arya. "Carry on, Ms. Blake." She gave a small nod and turned back to the screen. For a moment, she paused, then she clicked the remote. The next slide showed a grainy satellite photo of a valley. "The Camdar Ridge," she said softly. "I buried 2 friends here. One of them died saving a family that had once fed us soup from a dented pot. I remember the smell of that soup more vividly than the gunfire." Silence again, not from shock but from respect. In that moment, no one saw a woman covered in ink. They saw what she had survived. And finally, they understood why she had come to speak. They didn't look at her the same way anymore. Arya could feel it. The room had shifted. The posture of the soldiers, young, proud, sharp-edged, had softened, subtly but unmistakably. Shoulders lowered, eyes didn't dart away in boredom, hands weren't fidgeting with pens or notepads. They were watching her now, actually seeing her. Even Chief Donovan, though still sitting at the back like a storm cloud, was quiet. Arya stood beside the projection screen, laser pointer idle in her hand. The map behind her showed nothing more than ridgelines and coordinates, but to her, it was a graveyard, a memory field, a place that had changed her in ways no uniform could prepare someone for. She turned to face them, meeting each face with quiet, unflinching honesty. "You all came in here expecting another lecture on terrain analysis, cultural sensitivity, and ROE enforcement," she said. "You probably thought this would be the easiest 90 minutes of your training rotation." A few gave sheepish nods. 1 or 2 even smiled, tight and nervous. "But here's the thing," she continued. "Out there, in the places you'll go, the places you don't talk about on the phone with your families, knowing how to shoot won't be enough. You'll need to know when not to." She clicked to the next slide. A still image appeared: a dusty Afghan street, children playing soccer in the background, a woman walking with 2 goats across the road. "This looks boring," Arya said. "Safe. But to the trained eye, there's no tire tracks, no foot traffic on the left side. That's not good. The villagers know something you don't. There's a reason they're avoiding it." She turned back to the room. 3 weeks after this photo was taken, a convoy hit an IED right there. Silence. One of the soldiers raised his hand, this time with genuine curiosity, not bravado. "How did you know?" he asked. Arya pointed to the corner of the image. "See that little boy? He's holding a toy car, but it's upside down, not by accident. It's a signal." Several heads turned, jaws tightening. "It's called human terrain intelligence," she said. "You won't learn it in a shooting range. You learn it by paying attention, by earning trust, by listening more than you talk." A second hand went up, then a third. They started asking questions not just about the tactics, but about the people. How did she build rapport? How did she learn dialects? How did she know when someone was lying or when someone was too afraid to tell the truth? And Arya answered everyone, not with textbook phrases, but with real stories, raw and unfiltered. She spoke of an old woman who smuggled messages inside bread loaves, of a teenager who volunteered information only to disappear days later, of nights spent on rooftops translating whispered intelligence while gunships patrolled overhead. The SEAL candidates' boys who had been taught to stay hard, stay sharp, stay lethal, were learning something they hadn't expected. That compassion was not weakness. That empathy could save more lives than any rifle. Chief Donovan hadn't said a word the entire time, but he hadn't left either. And when Arya paused for water, she caught him glancing down at the back of his hand at a faded scar. Maybe remembering something. Maybe someone... She walked back to the front of the room, looking over the young faces that would soon be in the same valleys, facing the same choices. You want to be warriors, she said. But warriors don't just fight. They protect. They understand. They see. She tapped her forearm, where the black star ink still peeked from her rolled sleeve. This isn't decoration. It's not for Instagram. This is how I carry those who didn't make it. It's how I remember why I came back, and why you need to come back too. No one spoke. They just listened. And that's when Arya knew something inside the room had changed. Not just how they saw her, but how they saw the mission. When the lecture ended, Arya didn't pack up right away. She stood quietly by the podium as the last slide and image of a local elder shaking hands with a Navy team lingered on the screen behind her. It was an image of peace, not power, trust, not tactics. She watched as the soldiers slowly gathered their things, but many of them hesitated like they didn't want to leave just yet. One by one, they began approaching her. Not with arrogance, with respect. Ma'am, what dialect did you use in Helmand? How do you know when an elder's just telling you what he thinks you want to hear? Can I learn that kind of body language reading? Is it something you were taught or something you lived? Arya answered them all, patiently, thoroughly. Some she corrected gently, others she challenged, nudging their mindset, their instincts. You could tell they weren't used to being spoken to that way by civilians, but they weren't resisting it either. They were absorbing it. One of the younger ones, tall, maybe 20, with a sharp jaw and unsure eyes, lingered last. I just wanted to say, he began, voice wavering slightly. I didn't know someone like you had been through all that. You don't look... Arya smiled softly. Finishing for him, I don't look like the people in your war stories. He looked down, embarrassed. Yeah. She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. That's okay. But now you know. Don't forget it. He nodded, then turned to go. Just as he reached the door, Captain Reeves stepped back in. The rest of the team cleared the room, but Reeves stayed, his expression unreadable. You broke them open, Arya, he said after a pause. I don't think they'll look at the world or a village elder the same way again. That's the point, she replied. It's not about turning them into diplomats. It's about making them aware so they stop being blind hammers. He nodded. You've got more of that in you, don't you? Arya tilted her head, curious. More of what? He stepped closer. This, teaching, leading, translating the invisible into something they can carry into the field. She hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. Are you asking me if I want to join the staff? He didn't smile, but there was something in his voice, admiration, perhaps even hope. I'm asking if you're ready to step out of the shadows. We need more people like you on the front lines of thought, not just operations. If you're willing... Arya glanced toward the window. Outside, rows of recruits were jogging in formation, shouting cadence. She remembered what it felt like to be in the mission, not speaking about it in past tense. She missed it. She always would. But something had shifted in her, too. She had made 40 future warriors stop and think not about how to fight harder, but about how to see deeper. That was its own kind of war. And maybe, just maybe, her battlefield had changed. Give me the weekend, she said. I'll think about it. Reeves nodded. Of course. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Oh, and Arya. She looked up. That slide, the handshake photo, was that your team? She smiled faintly. Yeah, that's me. Second from the left. The elder's name was Rafiq. He gave us his only goat after we treated his daughter's infection. He never trusted Americans before that day. Reeves blinked, surprised. You're full of stories like that, aren't you? No, she said quietly. I'm full of people. Stories just happen when you care enough to remember them. When the door shut behind him, Arya stood in the quiet room for a long moment. She looked down at her arms, still rolled up, still inked with valleys and names and memories. For the first time in a long while, the ink didn't feel like a shield. It felt like permission. The decision didn't come easily. That weekend, Arya drove out to the coast, where the Pacific wind whipped through the cliffs and the salt stuck to her lips. She sat alone on a worn wooden bench, watching the waves break, and let the silence settle around her like armor she didn't need anymore. She thought about her last mission, the one that left a star inked near her wrist. She thought about Nolan, his blood, his last breath, and how it pooled in her lap as she called in for help that never came. She thought about Rafiq's daughter, and the way the little girl had reached out to touch the edge of her uniform, not in fear, but in trust. And then she thought about those young men in the lecture hall, leaning forward to understand a world they'd been trained to ignore. It stirred something in her she hadn't felt in a long time, purpose without adrenaline, service without a rifle. On Monday morning, Arya walked into Captain Reeves's office wearing the same crimson blouse, no camouflage, no armor, just herself. "I'm in," she said simply. Reeves looked up from his desk, then stood. "That's the best call I've had in months." The transition was quiet but powerful. In the weeks that followed, Arya became more than a guest speaker. She was added to the permanent instruction team, though her syllabus didn't look like anything standard. Her modules were built on nuanced cultural resilience, negotiation under stress, human terrain intelligence, emotional indicators in conflict zones. At first, some of the other instructors questioned it. A few even resisted. But Arya didn't need their approval, only their attention. And she earned it. One morning, during a field exercise simulation, a group of candidates walked into a carefully staged Afghan village mock-up. Role players spoke in local dialects. Women wore hijabs. Children played with sticks and dirt. Most of the candidates immediately went tactical stacking, signaling, securing. Arya stood in the control tent, watching it unfold through the monitor. Then, one of the soldiers hesitated. He stepped back from formation, looked at the children, at the dust, at the vendor who avoided one particular corner of the market. And he said, "Something's wrong. That alley's too quiet. Locals are steering clear." The lead instructor raised an eyebrow. "What do you suggest?" He answered, "We go soft entry. Engage the elder. Ask about the roadworks. If it's bad, he'll dodge. If it's real, he'll talk asphalt." They paused the simulation. Arya stepped in. "That's a real-world answer," she said. "That's how you save lives." After that, everything changed. Cadets began to come to her office after hours, notebooks in hand, questions pouring out of them. Some wanted to know how to build trust. Others just wanted to ask about her. What was it like being the only woman on black ops teams? How did she survive being dismissed, overlooked, doubted? She answered them honestly. "I didn't need to be seen by everyone," she told one student. "I just needed to be useful, and the ones who mattered always figured it out." One night, after a long session, she stepped into the hallway to find someone waiting. It was Chief Donovan. Gone was the rigid posture. Gone was the cutting edge in his voice. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Arya," she corrected. He nodded, cleared his throat. "I listened to your last module," he said. "From the hallway. You were talking about relational leverage in tribal settings. I never learned that stuff. Always relied on force." She nodded but said nothing. "I just wanted to say, thanks," he added after a long pause, "for the lesson, and for not writing me off." Arya offered him a tired smile. "We've all made bad calls, Chief. What matters is what you do after." He looked at her arms, now partially covered. "I used to think tattoos like that were a distraction," he said. "And now?" He hesitated. "Then now I think they're a reminder." She didn't answer. She just nodded once low and slow. And as he turned to leave, Arya realized something. She hadn't just earned their respect. She had shifted the culture an inch at a time. Not through rank, not through fear, but through truth. The air outside the classroom that evening was cooler than usual, soft with that golden hour haze that made everything look quieter, gentler. Arya stood near the edge of the concrete path, sipping from a paper cup of stale coffee, watching the younger recruits jog past in formation, their cadence sharp and rhythmic, echoing between the barracks. She didn't belong to them anymore, not in uniform, not in rank, but somehow she felt more connected than she ever had before. There were no bullets flying here, no villages to win over, no radios crackling with the sound of fear. But there were minds opening, and to Arya, that felt just as vital. "Ms. Blake," a voice called gently behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Reed, the same one who had tried to diffuse the tension during her very first briefing weeks ago, walking toward her. In his hands was a manila folder. "Got something for you," he said, handing it over. "Thought you should see this." She opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten letters, some short, some just scribbled thoughts on notebook paper. They were from the students, from the same young men who had once dismissed her. "You changed the way I look at the mission. I'll never forget the story about the boy with the upside-down toy car. I'm learning to see, not just react. Thank you." Her throat tightened. She closed the folder and held it to her chest. Reed smiled. "They don't say it out loud, but they talk about you like a legend now." Arya shook her head, laughing softly. "I'm not a legend. I'm just the ghost they didn't expect to meet." "Yeah," he replied, "and that's what makes you unforgettable." They stood in silence for a moment. Then he added, "We're hosting a joint training next month. Teams from across the country. Command wants you to open the week." She raised an eyebrow. "Me, you sure about that?" "They asked for you by name." Arya didn't answer right away. She looked out at the horizon where the sun had dipped low, painting the sky in deep orange and indigo. She thought about the valleys she'd walked, the friends she'd lost, the villagers whose names still inked her skin. And then she smiled. "They want to talk about cultural warfare," she asked. "They want to talk about surviving it," Reed replied. She nodded. "Then I'll be there." Later that night, Arya walked alone back to her car, the folder of letters still in her hands. As she approached the lot, she saw someone waiting beside her vehicle. Chief Donovan. Again. But this time, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Gratitude, humility, and maybe healing. He stepped aside respectfully as she approached. "I saw your name on the docket for next month," he said. Still surprised, she teased. He shook his head. "Not anymore." There was a pause before he added, "I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing more than you expect." She didn't say anything, just waited. "My daughter has a few tattoos," he said. "I used to give her grief about them. Told her they were loud, attention-seeking." Arya raised her eyebrows, but still said nothing. He continued, voice rougher now. "After hearing you talk, I asked her to tell me what they meant. Turns out, one of them is the name of her friend who died in high school. Another's a poem in Gaelic that her grandmother used to read her." His eyes looked shinier in the dim light. "I was blind to it, just like I was blind to you." Arya stepped forward, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then it sounds like you're finally learning how to see," she whispered. He nodded once. "Thanks for not giving up on old dogs." Arya smiled. "We don't give up. We retrain." She got into her car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and started the engine. The dashboard lights flickered on, illuminating the small black star inked near her wrist. As she pulled away, she glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Donovan stood still, hand raised not in salute, but in quiet acknowledgement. She turned up the music. Let it carry her home. Because this time, home wasn't a place on a map. It was knowing her scars had become someone else's compass. We often think strength wears a uniform, that valor comes with a rank, that stories worth honoring must come from those shouting orders or pulling triggers. But the truth is quieter. Sometimes, it's inked on skin instead of stitched on a name tape. Sometimes, It's found in the eyes of someone you underestimated, someone who doesn't match the profile but carries the weight of wars most will never understand. The ink on Arya's arms wasn't a decoration. It was a storybook, a gravestone, a promise. If Arya's story meant something to you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.